Hello and welcome to Enquire to Choir. My name is Eva and I'm here to help you, fellow choir people. Okay, so I don't know at what stage of your choir concert season you are, but here in Croatia, it's complete chaos because a month and a half ago, suddenly everything came back to normal. And it turns out my choirs and I are at the height of the choir concert season. We aim for big performances at the end of May, which means April, which we are currently in, is complete chaos. The biggest reason why this is a complete shock for me is I realized that we haven't had the height of the concert season for 3 years, not 2 years, 3 years, because the last time the height of the season was starting was just when the lockdown happened. We never actually got to the finale. Maybe it's because we've had this long pause, but I realized in the past few weeks that I'm processing choir rehearsals in a different way. I realized some of the things about them were not accidental. Choir rehearsals can be characterized more specifically. It turns out that for 10 years I have been experiencing certain rehearsals thinking that was an exception or that was a surprise while going home after finishing the said rehearsal. However, that has repeated enough times for me to realize that those rehearsals, those strange rehearsals, are actually a type of a choir rehearsal. This is helpful for me because I can prepare myself better when I'm coming to the rehearsal. If I know what the main character of the rehearsal is going to be, and I can also process a finished rehearsal better if I can define it. So in this video, I will give you this characterization of mine in two ways: the technical character of the choir rehearsal and the empirical character of a choir rehearsal. The technical character will be based on the main point or the main outcome I expect of the rehearsal to have or to bring. And the empirical characterization is based on finishing the rehearsal, going home thinking, what was that? And coming back to the next rehearsal more level-headed. Let's go. Maybe you watched a video here on the channel about choir rehearsals called How to Do a Choir Rehearsal. You can watch it here, which actually gives you a template I made for myself. I mentioned that template for choir rehearsal in that video, and that template is based on the phase a certain music score is in. Is the choir reading the new music score? Is it practicing it or perfecting it? And while I still stand strongly by this train of thought, I realized that the main point of each rehearsal is different. Plus, it is also really difficult to do a general template of a choir rehearsal, which works for every choir, every culture, every position you are in as a viewer of the video. When I plan the upcoming choir concert season, which also has a video here on the channel, you can watch it, I make sure that every rehearsal has an outcome I want to achieve at that rehearsal to be able to proceed with the plan I made. Of course, I can't always guarantee every outcome of the rehearsal that we will manage to get to it every rehearsal, but I can do my best to predict it, and I can do my best to stay flexible with the season plan to make sure that my choir's on track for the goals to be achieved. You can track your choir concert season by characterizing every rehearsal. If you define which type of a rehearsal is it, what is its main point, what do you want to achieve as the choir director, what the choir needs to do that rehearsal, what do we need to accomplish this rehearsal in order for the next rehearsal to be as successful, or for the next rehearsal to be prepared. So let's do the technical characterization, shall we? The first type of a rehearsal is the most common that happens at the beginning or when you're preparing for something. You were told that you're going to have a performance and you need new scores. The type of the rehearsal you are going to need is reading the new score rehearsal. And while this seems really obvious, I want you to acknowledge that to read a new score, you need a certain kind of concentration. You need to have a certain amount of time. And it's not the same when you're starting a new score and when you're already in it for a while and reading further parts of the score. This reading new score rehearsal is a type of a rehearsal, and I announced that to my choir. I announce it at the beginning of the rehearsal, or I announce it at the end of the rehearsal before. I say, listen, the next rehearsal is a reading rehearsal. So come prepared to have a certain amount of concentration. And from experience, I learned that it's beneficial for them to know that they're going to read new scores. From experience, I also learned that it's really painful to be reading always the same score. If you have a lot of new scores to read, several, more than one, it helps if you plan for several reading rehearsals for several scores and do them simultaneously. So on every rehearsal, do a few parts of every new score. It turns out that it's better for their concentration and for their motivation. Because if you are working with a non-professional choir, you know how important motivation is for your choir singers. And the main point of coming to the choir is to sing. And when you're reading the new score, you're not actually, singing. You're reading and learning and studying, and it's a different thing. So it really helps if you tell your choir that this is a reading rehearsal. It's helpful if you define those rehearsals that way, because by defining them as reading rehearsals, you give your choir an input to have a certain kind of concentration. Also, I want to point out that reading new score and starting new scores, at that beginning, they don't know what the score is about, and it is your responsibility to define it. So starting a new score asks for your active participation when it comes to it, because if you define it well, it will be greatly beneficial. And if you define the character of the new score, their learning, you can do a lot immediately. So connecting everything immediately when it comes to, okay, now we have a jump when it comes to the notes. But realize that at that moment, sopranos and basses have the same note in a different octave. So that can help you. You can also watch the video How to Learn a New Choir Score. But my main point of this character of this rehearsal is you prepare your choir and yourself for a certain kind of learning. And if they're prepared for it, then it could be more efficient. The second type of rehearsal is, let's continue reading the new score rehearsal. You're not starting from scratch. They already know what the score is about. They have already learned, for example, the first part or the second part, and you're continuing with the score. The problem with that kind of a rehearsal is they know they're coming to the rehearsal and they're going to learn further parts of the score. If they don't like the score, if they don't like that song and they find it boring, or they found their last rehearsal when they started reading the new score boring, what are the chances they're going to come to the rehearsal, or that they're going to find it beneficial, or they're going to find it effective? That is the problem with that rehearsal. And if you have that, let's continue reading the new score rehearsal. You have to pair it with something. You have to pair it with the fact that they will sing some other songs. So they will continue learning the score, but at the same time, at the same rehearsal, they're going to sing something. That makes up for the fact they're still just reading new music. Of course, some of them may think that it's really great to learn new scores, they're really looking forward to it, but to find the motivation to learn new score, you have to really work on it. And for them, not to find it boring or not to be bored, because it's a really, tentative thing and it's detailed and it can be really painful to learn new scores, let's be honest, and for you as the choir director as well. So let's continue reading. The new score rehearsal is best paired with singing something they know. The best rehearsal for repeating a score which they know but they haven't sung in a while. Type number 3. Let's get through reading the really difficult part in the score rehearsal. I recently had that kind of a rehearsal. Oh my God, it was really painful. It took an hour to read 8 bars, only 8 bars for part choir. It was a really difficult rhythm, really difficult lyrics for everything to connect. It was, but there is no way around it. You have to go through it. And if you prepare your choir for that, if you say, listen, we do this now and then we've done it. This is the most difficult part. We're going to do this today and then we know the score. Then we are done with the most difficult part. If there are parts coming after that part in the score, you already know them because it's only a repetition of the parts before. Or when we learn this part, we know the main point of that score and we can start singing it in general. If you know that that kind of a rehearsal is coming up for you, please analyze that score really well. It really helps you. And it's really difficult to do that kind of a rehearsal because you have to stay really concentrated. You have to stay really, punctual, and you have to press on the details, and you have to manage that kind of an energy in the room. So be prepared, analyze the score, make your life easier, and just give your choir that kind of a rehearsal and then go on with it. The best part about that rehearsal is once you've done it, you've done it. Let's try it from the beginning to the end reading rehearsal. So you've read the score, but you haven't sung it really. And you've been reading it for a while. And now it comes to that point. Let's start it from the beginning to the end. Let's try to sing it. This kind of a rehearsal is different because they already know the score, but they don't really know the score. They don't know how it goes, how it moves, where the weak points are. And they don't know where the parts they don't really know are. They don't know what they don't know. They think they know, but they're not sure. And it's not until this kind of a rehearsal when you realize how much they remember, how much they do not. So at this kind of a rehearsal, you will go through it once again and be prepared that maybe you will have to repeat all of it, but it will go much quicker than before. Just don't put yourself in a trap. Don't go through everything from the very beginning into very much detail. Don't repeat everything like they're seeing it for the first time. If most of the choir has been at the rehearsals when you were reading the score for the first time, then they know at least something, and you need to pressure them a bit to connect everything, because sometimes it's about saying, listen, we've been reading it for a while, you know it, at least 10% of it you know. Please bring that effort to me, because if we have to do it all over again, that means that you were losing precious time, you were wasting your time. Don't do that. So give me a bigger effort and let's start from the beginning and let's see if it's better. Practicing rehearsal. So you know the score, they know the score, they learned the score, but it's in the next phase. There are certain jumps, there are certain things they have to sing, there are certain melodies they have to perfect. Now you're practicing it. You define the dynamics, the details, you teach them how you will conduct it so you can make it even better. I love those kinds of rehearsals because it's the middle stage, It's the first time you start working on something in greater detail. That's when the music starts happening. And that's when the score starts making sense. And at those rehearsals, the choir members tend to find their motivation again. For that reason, I think it is very important to say, if you do 2 months of reading new scores without any singing, that could really deflate the motivation of your choir members. It's a different thing if you're doing a really large score, really classical piece, a lot of movements and stuff. But for this particular part, for this particular kinds of scores, if there are, songs, regular songs, if you're working on only one song and you're really, at a certain point, it will become very boring for them and for you. You don't want that. Vocal drills and vocal technique practice rehearsal. You've been doing a certain score, your choir has been singing for a while, you haven't done the vocal technique repetition in a while, and there comes a point when you realize that your choir is in need of that kind of practice. You find the time for that kind of a rehearsal. Listen, we are always in some kind of a rush to do something, but once in a while you will find the time to do this kind of a rehearsal. Either you do the whole rehearsal with only vocal technique practice, or you dedicate 80% of the rehearsal time for that practice, so you can apply it to the music you're working on at the end of the rehearsal. I know it's really painful to find the time for this, but if you find it, I think it could be really beneficial. And sometimes I really do this on purpose, even though I'm in a rush to learn something. But if they have read the scores, if they can sing it mostly, then it's okay. I can find the time. And it turns out that doing one rehearsal of that type saves me a lot of trouble for the following rehearsals. I don't have to repeat everything about the vocal technique if I dedicate the time at a single rehearsal. Singing for real, stopping for details. I love these kinds of rehearsals. They know most of the score, they feel comfortable with it, and now we can really work on it. They know most of the things, most of the dynamics, the things that need to happen, and then we can work on the details. On the choir sound, on the amount of sound that is going to be someplace, who is going to be louder, who has to be louder, what the balance of the voices is. But it's important that all of the details are done while singing, they have to feel the singing. We're over with the over-analyzing the score. We're singing and working on details. They have to find the motivation and they have to start feeling the new scores. That kind of a rehearsal is one of the first rehearsals when you feel, okay, now we're actually doing something, at least in your choir members' eyes. Next type of rehearsals, stamina gain practice. Listen, you need the time to do this. You need to take the time to do this. Because, for example, one of my choirs is celebrating 10 years in a month. And we are celebrating by singing 10 songs. 10 songs that are really different. They're all really difficult. And it's a really different thing if you sing 2 scores or 10 scores at the rehearsal and stopping and trying again and working on the details and everything. Coming to the concert and having to sing 10 songs in a row. You do not know where your concentration is going to fall. You do not know if they're able to sing for that long. They don't know how to preserve their voices for 10 songs, for example. So these kinds of rehearsals are necessary. And please don't do those kinds of rehearsals at the very last minute. You can't work on their stamina if it is the night before a concert, at least a month before the performance, if you have that luxury. Singing all the way. Singing all the way kind of a rehearsal is when you connect everything. You connect all the dots, the scores, the stamina, the dynamics, the details. You expect of them to do everything, but you still have the time to correct things. So they sing the song and you figure out what needs to be perfected, and then you tell them that. Or you give a critique, listen, this was great, but you could do this better. It would help you if you do this. It would be better if you do that. All of that is at that rehearsal. That kind of a rehearsal happens when they know the score, when they're close to the performance, when they feel comfortable in the music, and when they learned how to sing, for a longer period. And the last type, in my opinion, there are many more, but when it comes to this characterization, is the dress rehearsal. Dress rehearsal is a specific kind of a rehearsal, and it is different than the sound check. Dress rehearsal is going through the performance from the beginning to the end like it is a real performance, only you're able to see the state of everything and you can still intervene. I want to point out that a dress rehearsal requires your attention as a choir director in a specific way. You are the one who defines that it is a dress rehearsal, and if something goes wrong with a certain score, you are not able to stop them and let them sing again. They have to feel that feeling of, I can only go through this once. Because at the performance, you only have the one opportunity. That is the whole point of the performance. And that kind of a rehearsal, that kind of attitude comes from you, their choir director. And now for the empirical characterization of choir rehearsals. Listen, this is based on my experience. I could be totally wrong, and maybe you haven't experienced any kind of these rehearsals, but it saves me so much pain to be able to define these rehearsals because some of them are not pleasant and I can handle them better. Okay. So this is about, you have done a rehearsal, you planned for that rehearsal to be a certain kind of a rehearsal, you expected it to be a certain kind, and then it turned out that it was different. So what are those kinds of rehearsals? Well, the first kind is a good rehearsal. You know when you had a good rehearsal. Not every rehearsal is a good rehearsal. Many of them are just rehearsals, which didn't go bad. But sometimes you really you go home and you think, wow, this was a good rehearsal. It is very important to be aware when you had a particularly good rehearsal, because you can tell that to your choir. You can say, listen, this was a really good rehearsal. I'm very proud of you. We've managed to do everything, and you've done it in such a way that it was really efficient. So thank you for your time and for your effort. I'm sure that you will be able to see how good the rehearsal was. Also, it really gives you knowledge if you define a rehearsal as a good rehearsal, because you realize that your choir has changed, and everything evolves, and having a really good rehearsal is great. It's a great feeling. So it's important to realize that it was a good rehearsal. An unexpectedly great rehearsal that shifts things. Ah, I love those kinds of rehearsals. You come to the rehearsal expecting, you aim for things to be done and you do the things, but it turns out the choir entered the next stage and they've done all of the things at the rehearsals much better than you planned for, and they were, in the zone, and you've managed to be so successful, so efficient, that you realize that your whole concert plan you've been planning so far has to be shifted to the next level. It turns out that your choir became better than you were expecting them to be, and you have to adjust your plans. That means that for the next rehearsal, you can actually take the time to work on a vocal technique, or you have actually time to repeat a certain score you haven't sung in a while, or you can learn additional scores you haven't planned to have time for. That can all happen from that feeling of having that unexpected great rehearsal that shows that your choir is capable of so many things more than you were ever expecting. And listen, maybe you're thinking, oh, I will never have that kind of a rehearsal. Trust me, there will come a time. For one of my choirs, I waited 5 years. The effort was awarded, so stick to it, it will come. A difficult rehearsal. Oh man. I'm not even talking about a bad rehearsal. I'm talking about a difficult rehearsal. For example, I had one of those last week. I arrived to the rehearsal and it's springtime here and it was a really warm day, and it's one of those first warm days when you dressed yourself in the morning really wrongly for the day because you weren't expecting that it would be so warm, and we are all sweaty and smelly, and we arrived to the rehearsal space and it turns out the heating is on. It was so warm, the air was so dense, it was so difficult. Everything was out of tune just because, I was tired, they were tired. It was so painful to sing that rehearsal. And as the choir director, you don't have the luxury. You have to do the rehearsal. You can't say, oh, today is going to be a difficult day, let's not do the rehearsal. You have to go for it. You have to make the effort. The good part of that rehearsal is that you can spot it right away, when you're warming up. Wrong choice of words, but when you're doing choir warm-ups, you can really feel the energy in the room, and you can, with experience, realize that, oh my god, it's going to be that kind of a rehearsal. The thing about those kinds of rehearsals, they're not inefficient, they're just difficult. Maybe the amount of things you will be able to do will not be the amount you preferred, but the next time you come to the rehearsal, you will realize that it's not a difficult rehearsal again, and maybe some of the things you didn't manage to do at the last rehearsal, at the next rehearsal, it will go much more quickly. So it helps just to define that as a really difficult rehearsal, and it was difficult for everyone. I don't know, but it helps. And it turns out that those rehearsals happen. You can't predict them, they just happen. And when you go with them, it becomes easier. An unexpectedly useless rehearsal. Oh, this is so unmotivating. Plan for all the things, you do all the things, the choir gives an effort, everything is okay, but it turns out that you've done nothing. At the end of the rehearsal, they don't remember anything, everything fell apart, everything started to be much more complicated than it was before, and you think to yourself, my god, this was a completely useless rehearsal. It would be better if we didn't have it. Listen, that's not true. It's good that you had that kind of a rehearsal. It just shows that you hit a plateau and the energy wasn't there. They were not connecting with it, and it's okay. It was not in vain. You will see the next rehearsal that actually some of the things did stick, because you can't do something for an hour and not remember any of it. At least, 5% of some things will stick. And those 5% are better than the 0%. So if you have that kind of a rehearsal and if you're coming home thinking, oh my god, what was that? Maybe that is your feeling, but at the next rehearsal, you will realize that some things just take time, and the things that were not working at that rehearsal will be working maybe even immediately at the next one. Now we come to the bad rehearsal. Either it is your fault as a choir director, you were not there, you were not present, you were not prepared, you were not in the zone. You don't have the solution for the problems. You run into problems that you were not expecting, and it turns out that you don't know how to solve them. Or it was the choir's fault because they were not singing, they were not making the effort, they were not well behaved, they were not concentrated. I don't know, a lot of things can happen. The thing about bad rehearsals is a bad rehearsal is not a problem. Several bad rehearsals in a row are a problem, and they show that something needs to be changed. Having one bad rehearsal is okay. I mean, you're not perfect as a choir director. You will solve the problem for the next rehearsal. And your choir singers have sometimes bad days, as we all do. Don't make a big problem about it. And please don't finish that rehearsal by yelling at them. I mean, we all have bad days, and the choir has its bad days. Maybe the stars didn't connect the right way, you know. I'm not worried if I have a single bad rehearsal, even though I must say they're really demotivating. I really question everything. What is life? What is the meaning of life? What am I doing? I don't know anything. Who even put me in the choir director's place? That's all natural, but it's not a problem if you have a bad rehearsal. It's a problem if the bad rehearsals keep repeating and they keep repeating it the same way. If you recognize a certain problem and it's repeating, then you have to work on that problem, you know? That's the main thing about bad rehearsals. A bad rehearsal is not the problem. The problem of the bad rehearsal can become a problem. The crucial rehearsal. I think you know those kinds of rehearsals. You have your plan, you have your, for example, performance, and you have that certain rehearsal that will make or break the whole plan. You have to do a certain thing at that crucial rehearsal. You need your certain music scores to be read until that rehearsal, or you need to see that your choir is able to sing from the beginning to the end a certain music score at that rehearsal. That is the crucial rehearsal. You do have crucial goals for a certain crucial rehearsal, and if those goals are not met by that crucial or at that crucial rehearsal, you know that you will have to adapt the next rehearsals, because if some of the goals are not met until that point, it could be that you overestimated some things, underestimated some of the things, and you need to mend your plan, which again is not a sign for panic. It's just you need to be really honest with yourself, and it's better to define the problem earlier on and then to fix it, and not to be in a position where you have known for a while that things are not going well, but you are not dealing with it, and then it becomes a really big issue. So having a crucial rehearsal and saying that to your choir, even, I've been in those situations when I say, listen, this rehearsal is a crucial one. If we don't do this, and this, if we don't manage to hit those goals at this rehearsal, then we will have to think about it. And I talk to my choirs that way because it's not a threat. It's just I'm giving them the power to make things happen. And if they know that they're at the crucial rehearsal, maybe they will give me a bigger effort. Oh, I love this one because it turns out that it's a thing. The one rehearsal right after the performance. Oh man, I was so stressed about those rehearsals, but I've learned along the way that it's just a thing. So you worked for a performance and then you have the next performance, but in between those two performances, you have several rehearsals. For the first rehearsal, I guarantee you either half of the choir will not appear, or they will appear but they will not put their biggest effort. It's just good to be aware of that it's a thing. And actually it's a really logical psychological thing, because if you've been working for a performance and you've done the performance well, you will think, okay, now I can chill out for a bit. Or for the choir to be able to do that performance, the choir members have prioritized the choir in their life, and other things were suffering. They've sung the performance. What will happen in the following days? They will think, okay, I've now done the performance. I can take those things back. I can put choir on a lower shelf now and handle the things I have been neglecting. It's a thing. So my point is, I learned that the first rehearsal after the performance is not the rehearsal that I should plan for something crucial. Okay? I don't have big goals for that rehearsal. I aim for the rehearsal to be efficient and useful, but I don't put the biggest stress in it because from experience I learned that it's just a thing, you know? The extra rehearsal when nobody comes. You're in a time constraint, you realize that you need to do an extra rehearsal. You inform them about that rehearsal, you found the time, which is not a regular rehearsal time when it comes to your usual choir practice. You schedule the rehearsal, you tell them, listen, it's very important that you come to that rehearsal, we have a lot of work. And then nobody comes, or 20% of the choir comes. Happened to me a few days ago. I had the additional rehearsal. Out of 60 people, 20 appeared. First of all, don't start that rehearsal by being angry at the people who came to the rehearsal. That is the biggest problem when it comes to attendance. We are always telling people who have arrived to the rehearsal, why are you not attending rehearsals? Which is the biggest paradox in life, but you know, that's just the way it is. Don't think that the rehearsal is lost, and don't disrespect the fact that those people came to the rehearsal. Don't be angry at other people for not coming to the rehearsal, because what you don't know is, do they have something at that time? If they're used to certain times of rehearsals and you've put the extra rehearsal on a day when they can't arrange their life to be able to come to the rehearsal, then, you know, don't be nasty about it. It's a really disrespectful thing. I mean, I always say that we have to respect our choir members' time. They need to take the time out of their lives to come to the rehearsal. In my case, I always say, listen, dear choir people, thank you for coming to the rehearsal. I know we are all aware that this is not a regular choir number, but we're going to write down all of you who came. We will respect it. We will take note of it if there comes an opportunity in the future to recognize that as an extra thing you have done for the choir. And now we're going to go on with the rehearsal, and we are going to work on this rehearsal like everybody's here. And I can tell you that at the next rehearsal, we are not going to repeat everything as this rehearsal didn't happen, because I, as a choir director, want to respect your time. And I don't want to punish you, the people who came to the rehearsal, for the fact that the rest of the choir didn't come to the rehearsal. So I do that rehearsal as everybody was there. Of course, I have to adjust my expectations because I don't have that loud of a choir. I can't do many things. I can't work on dynamics if many of the people are missing, but I can do a lot of other stuff. I can adjust. I can, go through the lines maybe again. I can go through some of the details again. I adjust myself to those kinds of rehearsals because I want to show respect to the people who came to the rehearsal, because the people who came to the rehearsal are not the ones to blame. And most probably, the people who have not come to the rehearsal are not the ones to blame as well. It's just, you put an extra rehearsal and the timing of that rehearsal was not the best. But the extra rehearsal where everybody comes is a beautiful experience. I mean, that extra rehearsal can be such a big move, The point of these identifications of the extra rehearsals is check what the best timing for the rehearsal would be, if you can. The extra rehearsal can be greatly beneficial if it's done right. If you're doing that rehearsal just to do the extra rehearsal, then it could be a useless one. If you do an extra rehearsal, plan it really well, use that time. And if everybody comes and you manage to do all of the things, amazing. I love that feeling. Wow, the sun today. The sun today is just the one rehearsal when nobody comes. I will not repeat all the things I said a few moments ago about the people who come to the rehearsal, but I will say this. Sometimes it's not about them not wanting to come. It's just about things happened, and coincidentally, it happened that many of the people couldn't be there that rehearsal. The problem with this kind of a rehearsal is you don't know it will happen until you're already there. And if you're already there and your choir members are already there, doesn't matter how few of them, you have to do something. In that case, I do the rehearsal a bit short. I mean, I've had 8 people 2 days ago at the rehearsal. I've done the rehearsal, but we weren't there for 2 hours. We were there for an hour. I managed to go through some details and some lines they were asking me about, and it was actually a good rehearsal. And maybe some of the things will have to be repeated the next rehearsal when everybody's there, but not all of the things, because even those 8 people have become better singers and better informed when it comes to certain things, and they will be a good influence for the rest of the choir. One rehearsal like that is not a problem. The second in a row could be a problem. The third one in a row is a problem. You have to intervene, okay? So don't lose your temper at the first rehearsal like that. Don't think that everybody left the choir. But if it repeats, then ask, listen, what is going on? And finally, the one that I find to be really rare, but really, really inconvenient, is the one where things were not prepared. Maybe your choir management or you or somebody else didn't have enough time, enough resources to prepare for the rehearsal when it comes to copying the scores, handing out the scores to your choir members, sending out the recordings the choir members had to listen to in order to be better prepared for the rehearsal. And you come to the rehearsal and you are informed, listen, I know you plan to read the new scores, but we haven't managed to copy the scores yet, so we're not going to be able to do that today. And you're like, my God, I didn't plan for this. I don't have anything we can do. First of all, don't lose your temper, don't lose your time on pointing out that things had to be different and why is that like this. Of course, if that happens all the time or regularly or more than once in a row, then that's a problem. But sometimes it just happens, maybe it's even your own fault because you haven't sent the scores early enough for them to be able to copy it right away. Anyway, my point is, if you don't have anything to do, you can always do one of these 2 things. The first thing is do vocal technique exercise. You can even paint it that way, that you plan for that kind of a rehearsal and then they're already there and they don't have a way to get out of it. So and the second thing you can do is to try, if they don't have the scores and you have the scores you have to read or have to do, just try by making them learn it by heart, by repeating you singing it and not looking at the scores. Maybe that becomes really beneficial. Maybe that's the opportunity to immediately make them learn it by heart and to memorize it really well and to look at you as a conductor and You know, that is not the biggest problem in the world. Also, if you have already done certain scores, you can see if they know it by heart. If you make them sing it without the scores, maybe they realize that they know it better than they thought they do. So it's not a lost rehearsal, it's just about adjusting. Don't think of it as, oh my god, no, I don't want to do this rehearsal. Do vocal drills for an hour. Very beneficial. Every rehearsal is important. This is the whole point. You can't predict what your choir will do. You can't. You can aim for everything to happen, but you can't predict. And you, as a choir director, are just losing time if you decide that it's no use. Having a plan is great, but adjusting to it is necessary. So this characterization and me avoiding the sun throughout the video, I hope it was beneficial for you. I mean, the sun. Here comes the sun. Sun and the air. Okay, so I'm going to finish this video because, I mean, tomorrow is Sunday, I have to do it. I made a plan. I want you to have this video, and the sun is just, you know, there. Real life. I'm not a YouTuber. I'm just a choir director, a choir conductor who's trying to help you. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you want to know more about choirs and if you want to find out what else is here on the channel, you can watch all of the other videos here. You can subscribe. If you have a question, you can email me. And if you want to, you can give the thumbs up to the video. The weather forecast says it's a sunny day. And I hope you're having a lovely day as well. Stay safe, conduct well, conductors, and I'll see you next time. Bye!